At a family dinner, my sister tried to embarrass me for not lending her money. She smirked and said, "I guess some of us just aren't successful enough to help a family." My parents laughed along, but then I pulled out receipts proving she blew $15,000 on luxury bags while claiming to be broke. The room went silent. Then my father slammed his fork down and said, "You did what?" Family dinners were never my thing. Not because I didn't love my family, well, not entirely, but because they always came with a side of judgment and passive-aggressive comments. My sister, Camille, was a master of it. She always found a way to make herself look like the golden child, while making me feel like I was somehow falling short. This particular night, we were at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse in downtown Chicago, celebrating our mom's birthday. Dad had picked the place. He always did. If we're eating out, he'd say, "We're doing it right." The place smelled like butter, seared steak, and that faint, expensive whiff of wine and cologne. The kind of place you take a client if you wanted to close a big deal. Mom was already sipping on a glass of red wine, smiling as Dad told one of his usual stories about how he used to hustle his way through college. He told a million times, but Mom always laughed like it was brand new. Camille sat across from me, twirling the stem of her wine glass between her fingers, her lips pursed in amusement like she was waiting for the perfect moment to drop something. I knew her too well. She was up to something, and then she went in for the kill. "So," Camille said, stretching the word out as she leaned back in her chair. "I was just telling Mom and Dad how I had this amazing opportunity recently. But, she glanced at me, a smug little smirk forming. Some people don't believe in helping their family." I exhaled slowly and set down my fork. "Here we go." Mom turned to me with mild curiosity. "What's she talking about?" Camille let out a theatrical sigh, shaking her head as if I had deeply disappointed her. "I mean, I asked my own brother for a small loan. Nothing crazy, so I could invest in something that would really help me get ahead, and he turned me down." She tilted her head, her voice laced with fake concern. "I mean, I thought family was supposed to support each other." Dad took a slow sip of his whiskey. He wasn't biting yet, but I could see the curiosity in his eyes. I kept my face neutral. "Camille, you asked me for $5,000. She waved a manicured hand, "Which is nothing to someone like you." I clenched my jaw. I knew what she was trying to do. Paint me as the selfish, greedy brother who wouldn't share his wealth. And, judging by the way Mom was watching me now, it was almost working. Camille turned to our parents, her smirk growing. "I guess some of us just aren't successful enough to help our family." That did it. Mom let out a little laugh. Dad smirked into his drink. Camille looked satisfied, like she had just won the round. But she didn't know I had come prepared. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a folder I'd been keeping for a while. Screenshots, receipts, and bank statements. A little collection of Camille's spending habits, just in case she ever tried something like this. I placed my phone face up on the table and slid it toward her. "Before you embarrass yourself any further," I said, my voice even, "why don't you explain this?" She glanced down, and in an instant, her face paled. Her eyes flicked over the screen, scanning the evidence. A $3,200 Chanel bag. A $1,800 Gucci heels purchase. A $7,000 Louis Vuitton shopping spree in Miami. A $2,500 VIP spa weekend in Los Angeles. All within the last 6 months. Her hand darted out, but I was faster. I snatched my phone back before she could grab it. The table went silent. Dad's brow furrowed. "What is that?" I slid the phone toward him. "Go ahead. Scroll." Dad hesitated, then picked it up. His thumb moved slowly across the screen. His frown deepened with each flick. Mom leaned in, her lips pressed into a thin line. Camille shifted uncomfortably, her fingers curling into fists on her lap. Dad looked up, his face dark. Then, bang. He slammed his fork onto the table so hard that silverware rattled, and a few people from nearby tables turned to look. "You did what?" His voice was sharp, low, and filled with something I'd never heard directed at Camille before: anger. Camille flinched. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Dad's knuckles were white around his glass. "So let me get this straight. You came to your brother saying you were struggling. You came to me and your mother claiming you needed help. You made us feel bad for you. Meanwhile, you've been blowing thousands of dollars on luxury bags and vacations." Camille's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "It's not what it looks like." Dad let out a bitter laugh. "Really? Because it looks like you've been lying through your teeth while expecting everyone else to bankroll your lifestyle. And don't even try lying," I cut in, "because I have more receipts." Camille glared at me like she wanted to stab me with her steak knife. "Why the hell are you even keeping track of this? Are you stalking me?" I laughed, shaking my head. "No, Camille. I just don't trust you." Mom inhaled sharply, but for once, she didn't jump to Camille's defense. Dad, though, he was livid. "You came to me last month," he said, voice shaking. "You said you couldn't pay rent. You said you were desperate." His jaw clenched. "I gave you $2,000, Camille." She looked away. Dad's voice hardened. "Where did that money go?" She didn't answer. Dad let out a humorless chuckle. "Let me guess. A new purse. The silence was suffocating. Camille crossed her arms. You're all overreacting. Dad leaned back, exhaling through his nose. You know what? That's it. I'm done. Camille's eyes snapped to him. What? No more handouts. No more money. No more bailing you out. He shook his head. You want to live like this? Fine. But don't expect us to fund it. Camille's face twisted with disbelief. Dad, you can't be serious. Mom, to my surprise, didn't argue. She just shook her head, disappointment evident in her eyes. Camille turned to me, her voice venomous. I can't believe you did this to me. I met her gaze, unbothered. I didn't do anything to you. You did this to yourself. She didn't say another word. Dinner was officially ruined. And honestly, I was fine with that. The tension at the table was suffocating. No one spoke for a long minute. The air was thick with the weight of what had just happened. Camille sat stiffly in her chair, her arms crossed so tightly it looked like she was trying to physically hold herself together. Her face had gone from pale to red, then back to pale. Her fingers gripped the napkin in her lap, knuckles white. I took a slow sip of my water, watching as she processed the fact that, for the first time in her life, she wasn't going to talk her way out of this. Mom cleared her throat, pushing her wine glass away. She wasn't looking at Camille. She wasn't looking at anyone, really, just staring down at the table. Her lips pursed like she wanted to say something, but didn't know where to start. Dad was the first to break the silence. His voice was low and firm. You really thought we wouldn't find out? Camille exhaled sharply, her jaw tightening. I didn't lie. Dad scoffed. Really? What would you call it then? She rolled her eyes. I needed help. That's not lying. You said you couldn't afford rent. I couldn't, because you spent your money on designer crap. She huffed. I didn't spend all of it on bags and shoes. Some of it was for work. I snorted. You don't even have a real job, Camille. She turned on me so fast, I almost thought she'd throw her wine in my face. Excuse me? Oh, I'm sorry. Do you technically have a job? I leaned back in my chair. Because last I checked, you've been freelancing for, 5 years? And by freelancing, I mean doing the occasional Instagram sponsorship while living off Mom and Dad's money. Her eyes burned with anger. I have a business. I scoffed. Selling used clothes online isn't a business, Camille. Maybe if you actually supported me, I wouldn't need to ask for money, she snapped. I barked out a laugh. So what? It's my fault you blew 15 grand on crap you didn't need. Her face twisted. You wouldn't understand. You're just some boring corporate drone who got lucky. I tilted my head, feigning curiosity. Oh, right. I forgot that going to college, getting a degree, working my ass off, and building a career is just luck. Dad pinched the bridge of his nose, exhaling slowly like he was trying to keep his temper in check. Enough. Camille crossed her arms. This is ridiculous. I don't get why you're all acting like I committed some crime. It's my money. I can spend it however I want. Then why the hell are you always asking for more? I shot back. She glared. Because family is supposed to help each other. Dad shook his head. No, Camille. Family isn't supposed to enable this. Camille let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head in disbelief. Wow. She turned to Mom, her voice softening, like she was hoping for a last-minute lifeline. You're really just going to sit there and let them gang up on me? Mom hesitated, pressing her lips together. She glanced at Dad, then at me, then finally at Camille. Then she sighed. Camille, honey, your father's right. Camille's face dropped. Are you kidding me? Mom's voice was gentle but firm. We've been helping you for years. Giving you money, covering your bills, supporting you. And you keep making the same mistakes. She shook her head. At some point, you have to learn. Camille scoffed, letting out a humorless laugh. Unbelievable. She grabbed her phone and tapped furiously at the screen, probably texting someone about how horribly she was being treated. Dad leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. So, let me ask you something, Camille. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. What was the $5,000 for? She didn't look up. I told you. An investment. What investment? I don't owe you an explanation. Oh, but you do. His voice hardened. Because you didn't just ask your brother for money. You asked us for money too. And I want to know exactly what we were about to pay for. Camille finally looked up, her expression defiant. I was investing in my future. Dad stared at her, unimpressed. Camille, stop with the vague answers. What was the money for? She hesitated. I was planning to start my own boutique. I almost laughed out loud. A boutique. She nodded quickly. Yeah, an online boutique. Selling curated fashion pieces. I was going to know. You weren't. I interrupted. You were just going to keep spending. Her jaw clenched. You don't know that. Dad rubbed his temples. Let me get this straight. You wanted us to hand you 5 grand so you could start business? With no plan? No strategy? No inventory? I had a plan. Then where is it? I asked. She faltered. Do you even have a business model? Silence. Dad sighed, shaking his head. That's what I thought. Camille exhaled sharply, gripping the table. Jesus Christ. You're all acting like I asked for $1 million. Dad's eyes flashed. You've probably taken that much from us over the years. She recoiled like he had slapped her. I've kept track, Camille. He continued, his voice ice cold. Your mother and I have given you money so many times, and not once have you shown any responsibility with it. Camille's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. For the first time all night, she looked genuinely shaken. Dad leaned back, folding his arms. No more. Camille blinked. What? No more money. No more help. No more loans that we both know you'll never pay back. Her eyes flicked to Mom again, but Mom just shook her head. Camille's mouth opened and closed, her breath coming quicker. You're really doing this? Right now? Dad nodded. We are. She swallowed hard. You're cutting me off? Mom sighed. Camille, sweetheart, we're not cutting you off. We're letting you stand on your own. Camille let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Yeah, that's just a nice way of saying you're abandoning me. Dad's jaw tightened. You're 32 years old. It's time to grow up. That hit her like a slap. For a moment, she looked completely lost. Then her expression hardened. She shoved her chair back and grabbed her designer bag. You know what? Screw this. Dad exhaled, shaking his head. Where are you going? She stood up. Somewhere where I'm actually appreciated. I snorted. Good luck with that. She shot me a glare so sharp it could have cut glass, then stormed off, her heels clicking against the floor. The three of us sat there, watching as she disappeared out the restaurant doors. Mom let out a long, tired sigh. Dad picked up his whiskey and took a slow sip. I exhaled, shaking my head. That went well. No one laughed. The silence stretched between us, thick and uneasy. Camille was gone, but the weight of her presence still lingered at the table. Mom was stirring her wine absent-mindedly, staring at the half-melted ice cubes in her glass. Dad sat back in his chair, his face set in that unreadable expression he always wore when he was deep in thought. I leaned forward, rubbing a hand down my face. Well, that was a disaster. Mom sighed. She's upset. Dad let out a dry laugh. Good. Maybe it'll finally knock some sense into her. Mom shot him a look, but she didn't argue. That was the thing about Camille. She'd spent years perfecting the art of playing the victim, and for just as long, Mom had been her biggest enabler. But tonight was different. Dad wasn't budging, and neither was I. The waiter approached hesitantly, clearly unsure if he should even ask. Would you like to see the dessert menu? Dad waved him off. Just the check. As the waiter hurried away, Mom sighed again, softer this time. I just don't understand her. I scoffed. What's there to understand? She's selfish, she's entitled, and she's never had to take responsibility for anything in her life. Mom frowned, but she didn't deny it. Dad exhaled, running a hand through his thinning hair. I should have put a stop to this years ago. You tried, Mom said quietly. Not hard enough. The check arrived, and Dad pulled out his card without even glancing at the total. I knew he could afford it, but I also knew it wasn't about the money. It was about principle. He had spent years indulging Camille's whims, hoping she'd eventually grow up. Instead, she had taken and taken and taken, and never once given anything in return. Mom pushed her plate away, her appetite long gone. Do you think she'll be okay? I shrugged. That depends. On what? On whether she actually learned something from this, I said, or if she just finds some other poor sucker to bankroll her life. Dad grunted. Well, it won't be us. Mom was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached for her purse and stood up. We should go. We left the restaurant in silence, stepping out into the cool Chicago night. The air smelled like car exhaust and the faintest hint of rain. The city hummed around us, oblivious to the storm that had just taken place inside that steakhouse. As we made our way to the parking lot, I glanced at Mom. She was frowning, deep in thought. You okay? I asked. She hesitated. I know we did the right thing, but she's still my daughter. I sighed. Yeah, and she's my sister. But at some point, Mom, you can't keep saving her from herself. Mom pressed her lips together. She didn't answer. We reached Dad's car, and as he unlocked it, my phone buzzed. A text from Camille. I almost didn't check it, but curiosity won out. Camille, I hope you're happy. You just ruined my life. I exhaled sharply. Same old Camille. Dad glanced over. What? I turned my phone around so he could see the message. He snorted. Unbelievable. Mom, however, looked pained. Maybe I should talk to her. No, Dad said firmly. Not tonight. I nodded in agreement, slipping my phone back into my pocket. She needs to sit with this. Mom sighed but didn't argue. As we got into the car, I stared out the window, my mind replaying the events of the night. For the first time in years, Camille was finally facing consequences. The car ride home was quiet, the kind of silence that wasn't entirely comfortable but wasn't suffocating either. It was the silence of exhaustion. I could feel Mom sneaking glances at Dad every few minutes, as if waiting for him to say something to offer some reassurance that they'd made the right call. But he just stared straight ahead at the road, his jaw set tight. I checked my phone again. No new messages from Camille. Not that I was expecting an apology or anything remotely close to accountability. No, she was probably somewhere complaining about how horribly she had been treated, spinning the whole thing into another one of her dramatic sob stories. I could already picture it. her sitting in a bar with her friends, sipping a ridiculously overpriced cocktail, shaking her head as she said, "Can you believe my own family just abandoned me?" The thought made my stomach turn. As we pulled into my parents' driveway, Mom turned her seat to look at me. "Do you want to come inside for a bit?" I shook my head. "Nah, I think I've had enough family time for one night." Mom smiled faintly. "I don't blame you." Dad put the car in park and finally spoke. "You handled yourself well tonight." That took me by surprise. Dad wasn't the type to dish out praise often, especially not for something like calling out Camille's bullcrap. "I just told the truth," I said. Dad nodded. "Yeah, but the truth isn't always easy to say." He was right about that. Mom still looked troubled, even as she tried to mask it. "You really think she'll be okay?" I sighed. "I think she'll be forced to be okay." Mom nodded slowly, but she didn't seem convinced. "I just don't want her to do anything reckless. She'll probably just max out another credit card," I muttered. Dad grunted. "Then that's her problem." Mom sighed again, softer this time. "I guess so." I knew she was struggling with this. No matter how much Camille had taken advantage of them, no matter how many times she had lied, manipulated, and used them, Mom still saw her as her little girl. And I got it to an extent. Camille was family. But at some point, even family had to be held accountable. I opened the car door and stepped out. "Let me know if she tries to guilt trip you into giving her money." Dad let out a dry chuckle. "She won't get a damn cent from me." Mom just shook her head, looking out the window. "Good night, sweetheart." I nodded. "Night." I got into my car and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. Then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed. "Camille." I groaned. "Jesus, what now?" I opened the message. "Camille, you have no idea what you've done." I rolled my eyes and typed back. "Mio, I think I do." Seconds later, another text came through. "Camille, you're seriously okay with destroying our relationship over money?" I took a deep breath, debating whether to even engage. But then, another text popped up before I could put my phone down. "Camille, I needed that money. You don't understand." That caught my attention, because something about it felt off. "Me, what do you mean?" I waited. 3 dots appeared. Then it disappeared. Then reappeared. Finally, her response came. "Camille, forget it." I frowned. What the hell was that supposed to mean? Something about Camille's last message didn't sit right with me. For all her manipulative tendencies, she wasn't usually cryptic. She was dramatic, sure, but vague? Not really. If she wanted to guilt trip me, she'd do it outright. If she wanted to throw a tantrum, she'd make sure I knew exactly what she was upset about. But this felt different. I stared at my phone for a few seconds before shoving it into my pocket. If she wanted to play games, fine. I was done babysitting her. Or at least, that's what I told myself. But something about her words stuck with me. The next morning, I got up early, grabbed a coffee, and tried to focus on work. But my mind kept circling back to Camille's message. I needed that money. You don't understand. What was she hiding? After an hour of getting absolutely nothing done, I caved and did something I hadn't done in a while. I went down the social media rabbit hole. Camille was obsessed with posting her life online. Every brunch, every designer purchase, every effortless candid selfie taken in front of a luxury car that I knew wasn't hers. I scrolled through her Instagram and TikTok, skimming captions that read things like, "Luxury is a lifestyle, not a price tag. Boss babe moves only if you can't afford it. You're not working hard enough." The irony nearly made me choke on my coffee. But then I found something interesting. A few weeks ago, she had posted a picture of herself standing in front of a luxury apartment building. One of those high-rise places downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and a doorman. The caption read, "Finally moving up in the world. Can't wait to show you guys my new place." I frowned. Camille had never mentioned moving. And considering she had just asked me for $5,000, it didn't make sense. Something wasn't adding up. I kept digging. A few clicks later, I found a post from one of her friends, a girl named Bianca, who Camille had been glued to for the past few years. In the background of Bianca's Instagram story, I spotted something that made my stomach drop. A past due eviction notice pinned to the fridge. And Camille, laughing in the background, blissfully unaware. My fingers tightened around my phone. She hadn't needed that $5,000 for a business investment. She needed it because she was about to get kicked out of her apartment. I should have left it alone. I really should have. But Camille had spent years manipulating people, lying through her teeth, and acting like she was better than everyone else. She had humiliated me at dinner, lied to our parents, and expected us all to pick up the pieces when her reckless spending finally caught up to her. And now, she was about to face the consequences. But first, I needed proof. I called a friend of mine, Matt, who worked in real estate. "Hey, quick question," I said when he picked up. "Have you ever handled leasing contracts for those high-rises downtown?" "Yes, sometimes." "Why?" I hesitated. "Hypothetically, if someone was getting evicted from one, would that be public record?" Matt let out a low whistle. "Oof. Yeah, usually. Especially if the management company has already filed paperwork. Can you check something for me?" A few minutes later, he called back with exactly what I needed. Camille was 3 months behind on rent. She had ignored multiple warnings, dodged phone calls, and had less than a week before the final eviction notice would be processed. No wonder she had been so desperate. And that's when I had an idea. Camille thrived on image. She built her entire persona around looking rich, successful, and untouchable. She spent money she didn't have just to keep up the illusion. So what would happen if everyone suddenly knew the truth? I drafted a simple text and sent it to Camille. Hey, just a heads up, your apartment complex called Mom and Dad looking for you. Something about unpaid rent? I could practically hear her panic through the phone when she responded. Camille, WTF? Why would they do that? No idea. Weird though. You should probably call them. She left me to read. And then I waited. Because if there was one thing Camille couldn't handle, it was public humiliation. 3 days later, Camille's downfall began. First, her landlord finally served her the official eviction notice. And because she had ignored them for so long, they weren't offering any last-minute deals. Then, one of her friends, who was just as fake as she was, posted a screenshot of an email from the building management, confirming that Camille had been evicted. And once that got out, it spread like wildfire. People in her social circle started whispering. Some of them even commented under her old posts. What happened to that luxury lifestyle girl? Boss babe moves? More like broke babe moves. Guess money really is a price tag, huh? Camille, in full meltdown mode, deleted her Instagram. Then she texted me. Camille, you did this. I smirked and replied. No, Camille. You did this. She tried calling, but I ignored it. She wasn't looking for a solution. She was looking for someone to blame. And for once in her life, there was no one left to save her. Mom and Dad never gave her another dime. She tried moving in with friends, but most of them distanced themselves once they realized she wasn't the rich influencer she pretended to be. Last I heard, she was couch surfing while working a retail job she absolutely hated. And me? I went on with my life. No more guilt. No more drama. No more getting dragged into Camille's messes. For the first time in years, I felt free. And it was the best revenge I could have asked for.